Shana Tova, everyone. Happy New Year. Gemar Chatima Tova. May we all be inscribed in the book of life for another year. I hope, however you've celebrated Rosh Hashanah and will be celebrating Yom Kippur, that your experience is meaningful and inspires you to a year of blessing and of good health for all of us. Welcome to Conversations Over Coffee with me, Rabbi Steve Wernick. Today I am delighted to welcome our guest, Joanna Landau from Vibe Israel. And I look forward to talking to her about changing the conversation around Israel. Before we get to that, we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Betzedik. If you like today's conversation, don't forget to give us a thumbs up and share with your friends. Comments are always appreciated and help us get the conversation to more people. If you have any questions for our guests, please put them in Facebook or YouTube chat, and we'll do our best to bring them into the show. With that out of the way, let me introduce our guest. Joanna Landau was born in London and moved to Israel with her family when she was 5 years old. After serving in the IDF as a paramedic, she read law at Cambridge University, where she gained both a BA and MA degree. She holds an MBA as well from the Reichman University in Israel and worked as a lawyer in the high-tech industry and established 2 internet startups based in Tel Aviv. And, you know, I'm just a country rabbi. In 2009, Joanna founded Vibe Israel to change the way people think and feel about Israel. And that's really going to be the essence of our conversation tonight. Please welcome Joanna Landau.
Hi there.
Hi. It's a very impressive bio. It's like, the kind of things like, I know that when I write mine, it's like, will my mother be proud?
Well, you're not just a country rabbi. Come on.
Anyhow, Joanna and I met, we met in Basel for the 125th anniversary of the first Zionist Congress, and you were one of the presenters. And I was really moved. I mean, I knew about Vibe Israel from paying attention to the Jewish world, but I had never heard you before or met you before, and I was really, really impressed. I'm just glad that we were able to have this conversation.
Thank you.
Let's jump right in. What was it that you were seeing and experiencing in the environment of the Israel conversation that inspired you, or was that aha moment where, like, got to do something different?
Yeah. I think we're talking about almost 15 years ago when I had that aha moment. As you can hear, I'm originally from England. By the way, it's not coffee. I've got tea going on over here.
With milk or without milk? With milk or with lemon?
It's without milk, but
No
it should
milk.
be with milk. Proper English people drink with milk, whatever. And I moved to Israel, as you said, and explained when I was very young. So that was my parents' choice. But when I eventually lived in Israel and when I went to the army, that became my choice because I really love living in Israel, which is one of the things that I said at Basel. I love Israel, not just because I'm Jewish, not just because of the connection to the land, but I just really like the vibe, the atmosphere. I like my friends, I like what I do, and so on and so forth. And I had 3 kids. I was having all of them under the age of sort of 6 or 7, and I was sort of in my mid-30s and thinking, I'm enjoying what I'm doing professionally, but I felt that I should really be doing something more associated with meaning, something that more tikkun olam kind of thing. And so I looked around to see what it was that I felt concerned about. And my aha moment was that it seemed to me that it didn't make sense that I see one version of Israel, but the world seems to see another version. And when I say the world, to me, that was the non-Jewish world, because that was sort of what I was more connected to. And I didn't understand why there was that gap. And that was why I decided that I wanted to get involved and to change the conversation about Israel. And the question became, how do you do that? And that's what really interested me, because I felt that we needed to do something differently. And I like a good challenge. And I think that's what drew me in. Sort of, we know we need to change the conversation. We're trying all sorts of ways. what's going to make it work. And I stumbled across the strategy, which I think is very, very effective and is used by countries all over the world, and I felt should be used for Israel as well.
So, but before we get to that, I think it's always helpful to not assume that people know what we're talking about. Right? You know, it's to use a North American sports metaphor, inside baseball, right?
Okay.
So
I was building the drama.
talk a little bit more specifically about what it was about the conversation taking place in the world outside of the Jewish world, that was going on that you felt needed to be addressed.
So basically, I felt that the way that Israel was being viewed is through a very, very narrow lens. It was either we are the Jewish homeland, so it's a religious conversation, or we are dealing with a very, very horrible, long-lasting, who knows when it will end conflict with our neighbors. And those two lenses were defining who we are as Israelis and what we're all about. We saw that on TV, we saw that in newspapers. Any conversation about Israel would usually center about one of those two topics. But when you live in Israel, I mean, it's not what you do all day long. You don't spend all day long focused on those two topics. They're around you, they surround you, but you know, you've got a mortgage, you've got kids, you go out for dinner, you have friends, you've got culture, you've got lifestyle. Of course, you've got, you know, the Startup Nation. All these different things seem to me to not get enough attention. And there was too much attention being given to either religion or conflict. And what I noticed was particularly interesting is that we are the ones who were creating that association, in the sense that whenever Israel officially or the Jewish world spoke about Israel, it was through these two lenses. I think the book Startup Nation was one of the first that sort of expanded that lens, and various other things as well, of course. But that was what was so interesting to me, that it's not necessarily something that is completely out of our control. If we can decide what it is we want to talk about, then why don't we talk about what we're good at? Why don't we talk about our strengths? Why don't we look at ourselves like a product that needs to be marketed to a particular audience that could be very interested, but hardly knows that we exist? What they do know about Israel simply doesn't represent everything that Israel is.
You know, it seems to me that part of the reason that happens is the mythic nature of Israel as like the centerpiece of, you know, the three monotheistic religions, right? You know, when you read the Bible, the Hebrew Bible, the Christian Bible, the Quran, less the Quran, but certainly the Hebrew and the Christian Bible, there's a mythic nature to Israel, and the experience of those who live outside of Israel is very much tied to that myth. So it's almost like Israel gets boxed in to having to address the challenge of the myth and the reality, and the element of Israel as a normal country, which was Herzl's dream, right? You know,
Yeah.
you know, the element of Israel as a normal country is like it doesn't get to be part of the conversation.
That was exactly what I felt didn't make sense, because it's okay when you look at it, if the whole world was interested in the mythical aspect, if all people wanted to talk about was religion and politics and conflicts, then great, Israel is a really interesting focal piece, and all the world's eyes would be on us, which they were for a while. But that kind of finished about 15, 20 years ago. And with this new generation, the millennials, now we only talk about Gen Z, but there's millennials in between. And millennials and now Gen Z are really not that interested, and actually are withdrawing from organized religion. They're not as attracted to it. It's not so much a part of their lives. We're not only talking about Jews, of course, we're talking about Christian evangelicals. They have the same sort of experience. And if we are not now a topic that people would be interested in, why are we insisting on continuing to center the conversation about that? It's not to say that we shouldn't be talking about Israel as a country of the Jewish people, as a religious place, with all the wonderful historic sites and the archaeology. And of course, you know, you can walk along the Via Dolorosa, even if you're not Christian, and you put your hand where they claim that Jesus put his hand, and everybody, has some sort of sense of this myth, of this sort of mythicism, this sort of feeling of that you can't get in other places. But it's not enough. It's not enough to attract the next generation. And that's where I felt that we needed to start thinking differently.
So you identified the problem. How did you start thinking about a strategy for what you could bring to that problem that would be different from what was already happening in the landscape?
So the landscape mainly was doing advocacy for Israel, mainly focusing on that. So you've got Jewish advocacy and Israel advocacy. Jewish advocacy is, different. We're focusing in this conversation about Israel advocacy and explaining the policies of the Israeli government and trying to give context and to let people really understand that what we're doing is reasonable and understandable and complex and so on. I felt our conversations and what we were trying to say, doesn't matter how well we were saying it, seemed to fall on deaf ears. And it was very frustrating, and it is very frustrating still. At the same time, what I was discovering, this again was about 15 years ago, is that there was a new industry that was developing, and it's called country or city branding and marketing, which is basically, if you are a country and you want someone to pay attention to you, you have to act like a company that has a product that is new on the shelf. And how does one pay attention to the product? You brand it, you market it, you make people pay attention to it, and you have to focus on your strengths and not your weaknesses. You don't start off a conversation with what requires complex explanation. You start off with, what's easy to connect with, what's attractive, what's appealing. And countries started to do this. By the way, Israel was also there, and the foreign ministry, this I discovered as I was looking at this.
It's something that I remember Ido Aroni,
Exactly.
when he was the consul in New York, that he spent a lot of time talking about in terms of how to market Israel.
Right. So he
comes
became
from a marketing background, I believe, is one of the reasons.
So he became the consul in 2010, 2011. He actually started this process with several Americans as well back in 2005 already, or 2003 even. So this was starting to go on, and there was a project called the Brand Israel Project in the Israeli government, and I stumbled across it at a time when I was open to doing something with my life that was about tikkun olam. And for me, the tikkun olam was, I would like my children and their peers to look at Israel and say, wow, what an amazing place. I want to connect with it. It's got so many things that appeal to me. I'd like to do business with Israelis. I want to go travel there, and so on and so forth. For my own children, obviously, my desire is that they want to continue to be supportive and love Israel and be a part of the future of Israel and so on. And the way to do that is to brand and market Israel, which means to go and do all sorts of things that cause people to pay attention to it for all the right reasons, whether it's for business, whether it's for travel, whether it's as a tourism destination, whether it's to relocate here for work, anything like that, lifestyle, of course, music, culture, all these different things. And that's like a magnet. It's like a hook to get people attracted and connected emotionally to Israel. And the byproduct of that, which most countries don't really care about as much, is that there's also greater context for understanding the complexities of the country. So if you like someone and someone says to you they've done something wrong, then you don't automatically just take it as a given, because you know them, you know what their values are, you know what they're all about, and you give them some credit and you find out for yourself. Israel doesn't enjoy that credit because it doesn't benefit from having an initial, strong, positive emotional connection, especially with the next generation. That's
So
the major problem here.
why Vibe Israel? Why do that as an NGO? I mean, it sounds like that should be the job of the Ministry of Tourism or the Ministry of Immigration Absorption, Aliyah.
So most countries actually, yes, it sits either in the Prime Minister's office or foreign ministry or the industry and so on and so forth. And I started Vibe Israel to support the government project, because in every country where it's successful, it's not enough that you have a top-down element and somebody sort of dictates this is what should happen, unless it's a dictatorship, and then it works extremely well.
That's the definition of a dictatorship.
Yeah, really, for country branding, it's fantastic. Look at Saudi Arabia. Look at other countries where we're talking about very easily managed processes that are taking place, and suddenly people think Saudi Arabia is a wonderful place and want to go and see soccer games and so on. And in fact, it doesn't align with so many values.
Unless you're a journalist.
Yeah, well, yes, exactly. But young people don't notice those things. You're now going into a deeper level of analysis. The young people aren't there. They see cool stuff. They see Qatar, sponsoring Messi, and they're there. They're happy, And we are overthinking everything, right? We're putting too much attention on that. So yes, should it be a government project? Yes, and originally it was. The project itself, you're going to need to speak to the Israeli government why it's not on a larger scale. But that's why I ended up doing it. I didn't want to represent the state of Israel so much because it's so delicate and political. And I felt that for a country like Israel, a people-to-people connection would be much more powerful than if it were ministers and government representatives sharing the story.
So share with us, what is it exactly that Vibe Israel does, and how do you know you're being successful?
So our focus is basically on shaping the image of Israel amongst the next generation and making sure that, when I say next generation, I mean under the age of around 40, so millennials and Gen Z, making sure that they have a positive view of Israel, because we think that that's the basis for any expectation that they will support Israel in other areas as well. And we do this in a variety of ways. Country branding and marketing has a variety of different ways to achieve results. We focus on harnessing the power of social media to reach these results. We basically look at the fact that young people scroll the height of the Statue of Liberty every single day on their phones. And we ask ourselves, what are they saying about Israel when they're scrolling? And
Yeah.
you may
And again, I just want to make sure that everyone in the audience understands the analogy that you're giving, meaning that the Statue of Liberty is X feet or meters high, and that's how much time young people spend on their phone, scrolling up and down.
Yeah, it's a real statistic. I didn't make it up.
No, I know. I've seen this statistic.
Yeah.
I just, again, I want to make sure that everybody's with us on the same data point.
I appreciate that. And basically what happens is there is differently to what it was like when you and I were growing up. There's too much information out there. And so what young people do using the various technological tools is that they filter out anything that doesn't interest them.
Right.
So by definition, if they're not interested in religion and they're not interested in conflict, they probably would be pretty unaware of what Israel is all about. If they were interested in high tech, then they probably would see Israel. So it really depends what it is that they're interested in. And then you find out what it is they're interested in, and then you make sure that there's a lot of digital content that is on their what's called feeds, which is the social media. It's like a newspaper, but it's online. And you make sure that the content is on there telling Israel's story. So how do we do that? You can do that using digital campaigns, just like advertising in the past, just on social media, mainly through video. And you can push these videos and great content into literally the smartphones of the young people that you want to influence. You do that using paid ads and things like that. We came across and were quite original about 10 years ago, where we found that people were very, very influenced by what's called digital influencers. So years ago, these were bloggers, which is essentially kind of like journalists, but most of them don't actually have the degree or the expertise. They just started writing an online journal, and people started following them online. And they started getting a bigger and bigger following. And they have hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of people following them, just one person. And so we decided maybe instead of filling a bus of 50 people or spending a lot of money on bringing people on 5-star trips to Israel because they're congressmen or business decision makers, why don't we bring these bloggers and influencers to Israel? So it's either influencers or it's people like they have YouTube channels that are very big, or Instagram channels, TikTok.
Or now it's TikTok.
Now it's TikTok, yeah. And so we decided about 10 years ago to start bringing these kinds of people on trips. And we brought them on small trips, just like you don't bring 50 congressmen on one bus. You focus on the ones that you really want to influence and you feel can influence others. The same applies to these digital influencers. They really can be more powerful and influential, especially on the next generation.
And are they coming? Like when you reach out to them and say,
Easily.
"Hey, my name's Joanna. I'm calling from Vibe Israel. I'd like to talk to you about Israel and invite you on a trip." I mean, do they like really respond?
So it's interesting the way you led it. You said, "My name's Joanna. I'm from Vibe Israel. I'd like to talk to you about Israel and invite you on a trip." Don't do it that way. I say, "My name's Joanna. Hello. Would you be interested in a free trip to learn about what people in Israel do in the field that you write about?" So the first trip that we did was actually aimed at showcasing Israeli family life, because actually raising kids in Israel is great. It doesn't seem like it would be, but in fact, it's a great.
On the international happy indexes and
Yeah,
places to raise a family, it's always in the top 10.
top 10, exactly. So
Amazing.
but nobody
You
knows
would
it.
think with all the conflict and everything else, it would be the opposite, but no,
Exactly.
Israelis are extremely happy people.
Totally. And so we wanted to get that message out there, but if we just advertise it, it's not as impactful as we get somebody else to say it about us. So we sent out invitations and we said, "Would you be interested in a free trip to Israel?" Imagine you're a young mother who has a blog and you're influencing 100,000 people and you get a free trip to go without your baby or your husband and other children or other partner.
Sign me up.
Exactly. Everybody was like, "Sure, we'll
Is there a
come."
beach? Is there food?
Exactly.
A
And
little
so
wine?
people think I have a really difficult job. Quite the contrary. It's a free trip. People come. And over time, we, of course, got a very good name for ourselves. And so they started telling one another. And I'm very pleased to say that in the last decade, we managed to create over 1 billion positive mentions, which means that people are saying good things about Israel online on social media that has reached over 1 billion people that is positive about Israel. And so that's mainly how we do it. We've done other things such as
And does that
national
positivity,
campaigns.
like, so it's easy to do that when things are quiet. How are you measuring what happens when there are flare-ups, when the court case in Jerusalem comes and again um, creates conflict in terms of housing, when the Palestinian
You're talking about Operation Guardian.
when the Palestinian reporter is killed in the line of fire during a conflict, when rockets are flying and Israel's responding in Gaza. How does the does the positive experience that people have had, does it translate into a more nuanced response when things get hot?
So first of all, we need to think about what is the time frame that we're looking at. When we look at a year, for example, okay, and we look at Operation Guardian of the Walls, which is the first incident that you referred to, it was 11 days long. We forget because it felt like huge, but actually it was 11 days long. And that was in 2021. The last time we had such a big flare up was actually in 2014, okay, which was during the summer, which was 58 days long. So we had a good 7 years during which all sorts of things happened that we, the Jewish people, are tremendously aware of. The rest of the world was not focusing on, did Trump move the embassy to Jerusalem or not? Did this thing happen? Operation this, operation that. A lot of times it's not noticed. The last year's flare-up was very significant and very big. And of course, it was very big online as well. So what happens during those days? Of course, during those days, we do not continue saying, "Look, doesn't Israel have great hummus? And wouldn't it be a great place to visit right now?" If we were a company and we had a really serious crisis, we wouldn't be able to, during those days of the crisis, ignore that crisis altogether.
Right.
Having said that, the moment it was over, we go back. And we go back by doubling down on how much positive.
No, but my question, Joanna, is it's not necessarily what Vibe Israel does during those moments, but the people that you've brought to Israel right? I mean, so like I'll, when APAC, for example, or here in Canada at CPAC, when they bring um, freshman government leaders to Israel, um, they want them to have the experience and to like be able to evaluate Israel, not just from the lens of news media, right, or briefings, right? And they want them to know people and whatnot. So when things are going on, they can pick up the phone and call and say, "Hey, what's really going on?" And the goal is that when it comes time to vote in whatever legislature they're at, their votes will be representative of a more nuanced understanding of Israel than rather just the rabbit hole.
Right.
Um, so when things happen, do you monitor to see how the people that you've brought, if they're going to respond? I mean, so on the one hand, I hear you saying it's like most of these people don't care, right? Like the embassy moved to Jerusalem, most people probably didn't even pick it up at all.
Right.
But of those who do pick it up, um, you know, is there an impact on their influence, even when things in the region get hot?
Absolutely. Basically, I can tell you from what we, because I have 10 years worth of connection with these people. Um, what I'm seeing, and of course we do monitor it, and we do a lot of surveys, and every year we do global research about Israel and amongst young people and so on. And what we're seeing is that the people that we've brought now have an emotional connection. They may not stand up there and cast a vote like a young politician, because it's a completely different world that we're talking about.
Right.
But they will not stop posting positive things about Israel once the noise dies down. And we've even had people who've returned visited on their own. We've got one of the influencers who does retreats all over the world for women travelers, who's done at least 2 retreats in Israel as a result of us bringing her in 2016. We've seen, even in 2014, we had funding to do 6 tours, I think. We had done 2 tours, and then there was the summer troubles. I don't remember the name of the operation at the time, but it was the big one in 2014, and then we couldn't do tours over the summer, obviously,
That
and we didn't
cast
want
lead.
to. Cast lead, it might be cast
Yeah, I
lead,
think
yeah.
it was cast lead in
I think it's
2014.
okay. I don't remember.
Yeah, they all blur together. It's like
They're great names,
unfortunate.
whatever. It's like hurricanes, you know.
Right.
And what we saw, for example, we had done a tour on fashion, and we had brought a very top blogger who had 6 million followers and was a judge on America's Top Model and so on. And actually, during the months of the war, he posted a picture of a Jewish child and an Arab child together from his trip, and he just said, "I hope that my friends in the region are okay, and that we will see peace soon." And
Right.
that was the statement. And these are the kinds of things that I don't want to put into their mouths, and I don't want them to feel that that is our expectation, because if they think that we're bringing them to Israel in order to turn into advocates when things go wrong, they won't come, because they will not want to
Right.
be.
They don't want to feel that they're being manipulated for a different.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you bring them over and you give them such a great experience, and they really fall in love with the country and the people, then exactly that's what happens. They call and they say, "Are you okay? Are you all right?" They'll like my posts
Yeah,
or
they
love.
they build a relationship, and that relationship goes beyond that. And
I
but
think
but
that's what's missing for Israel. We
yeah.
haven't started building enough relationships with
So
people that
so
matter.
in the time that's left, um, what do you see in the horizon? Right, we just celebrated 125 years of Zionism. This year is Israel's 75th Yom Ha'atzmaut. You've been doing this now for 15 years, I think you said,
Yeah.
right? So what do you see in the next 5 years? What is it where does Vibe Israel go now?
So right now I'm actually writing a book to share my knowledge with the community. What I see is that this can't be a project that is solely led or invested in by one nonprofit. it has to be something that the community takes on and pushes. Even if the Israeli government doesn't, we can wait around forever. It might not happen. We don't even know what the next government is going to be. But just like the book Startup Nation was funded by philanthropy and pushed by philanthropy and embraced by the community and promoted globally, and really created an angle through which people could see Israel, we need to emulate that and do much more of it. And as many people as possible, hopefully, will get on board and understand that the place to really impact the next generation is on social media. I'm very optimistic.
A birthright for social media.
So if I were Birthright and I'm on the education committee of Birthright, and I've said to them, keep, and any mission to Israel, by the way, of a synagogue or anything, always keep one seat on the bus for a local influencer. Always. And invite them to come for free and let them document the trip. And that means that the rest of your congregation who wasn't fortunate enough to come will now enjoy the trip as well through this person's eyes. And I think that I'm very optimistic if that's what the community chooses to do. I'm a little bit pessimistic if the community chooses to actually digress and go back to doing more advocacy, more trying to get people to understand the complexities, because what I see is that we're not moving the needle fast enough. And most importantly, and really quite worryingly, we are starting to see a little bit of hemorrhaging from our own tribe. And that's what worries me. You look at young Jewish people, a Jewish millennial or Gen Z is a Gen Z or a millennial. If you don't manage to think of ways to interest non-Jewish millennials and Gen Z, you won't interest a Jewish one either. And therefore, go with Israel's strengths, go with what's trending. You have to put money into it. There's no choice. But there's this huge platform called social media. Every single company uses it today. Every country uses it today.
We're on it right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we're doing. We're like literally preaching. Yeah.
That's a great idea. We in Toronto, our community is planning a community mission to Israel for Yom Ha'atzmaut. I'm going to run that up the flagpole.
If I can, I would love to. First of all, more than welcome to anybody to ask me for advice and so on. We also have a website called Unboxing Israel, unboxing-israel.com, which is basically digital content for anybody who wants to tell a story about Israel that we know works for the next generation. So I'm talking about pictures and videos and links and
unboxing.com and
unboxing-israel.com.
Unboxing-israel.com. So we'll put that up on our own social media as part of that.
Yeah.
And then Vibe Israel is
vibeisrael.com.
Vibeisrael.com.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Joanna. This is a conversation we should continue at another time as well. I'm going to be in Israel in Tel Aviv in November, at the beginning of November, for the Sochnut meetings.
So come on over.
Let's find a time to get together.
Yeah, we can meet at this is Abima behind me in Tel Aviv.
Okay, so we'll meet there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Gamar Chatima Tova.
Thank you. Shana Tova to everyone.
A meaningful Yom Kippur and a meaningful fast. And for those that are joining us online, you can find out more about Vibe Israel, vibeisrael.com, or unboxing-israel.com. And we look forward to seeing you at Bet Tzedek over Yom Kippur, Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur. This Friday night, join us for Shabbat at the Floor, our musical, contemplative, very, very meaningful and beautiful Shabbat service. And 6 p.m. Friday, 9:30 a.m. on Shabbat morning. You can join us in person or online at www.bethtzedek.tv, because that's the world we live in. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.